All my life, certainly the last 15 to 20 years, I have been talking about black people making themselves more aware and other people more aware of how we helped to create this country.
Do you believe that blacks should celebrate America's 200th birthday?
There can be no celebration without black celebration.
200 years have passed in this country and black people are not free.
This edition of Black Journal is dedicated to the St. Louis Sentinel, the St. Louis Argus, and the St. Louis American, members of the crusading black press, serving, of course, St. Louis, Missouri, the 10th largest black community in the United States. Our theme on this series is Bicentennial, but we don't mean 100 years of living. What we mean is the black presence, yesterday and today. Although our theme is historical and contemporary, this edition will emphasize the present-day issues of Afro-Americans. The special edition will feature a discussion around the question, should blacks participate in the bicentennial activities? There are basically two schools of thought. One school asks, are we celebrating 100 years of slavery and racism? Others believe that we should celebrate our role in making America what it is. With me to discuss these questions are Lerone Bennett, senior editor of Ebony magazine and author of The Shaping of Black America, and the Honorable John Calhoun, special assistant to the President of the United States. I'd like to welcome you, gentlemen.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I will call you Lerone because I know you'd be a little inappropriate to call you Mr. Bennett. Lerone, you have been singled out almost as the spokesperson for the ideological point that blacks should resist celebrating America's 200th birthday. Am I basically correct?
I don't know whether I'm a national spokesman for that point of view, but I believe that certainly, and some people have supported that
in the
view.
issue that Ebony did, the special issue on the bicentennial, there were basically 3 points, and yours was used as the adamant no.
Right.
Would you clarify that point for me?
I take the position that black people should not participate in any way in the bicentennial because 200 years have passed in this country and black people are not free. I take the position, secondly, that it's unprecedented in world history for an oppressed people to celebrate their oppression. It just blows the mind. I take the position, thirdly, that not only black people, I say that no one in this country should celebrate anything. We haven't done anything to celebrate. We've got to do it. Fundamentally, my position is this, that we are celebrating the anniversary of the Declaration of Independence. All men were created equal. I'm saying in 1776, George Washington, Thomas Jefferson, and 95 to 99% of the white founding fathers didn't believe it. And I'm saying that 200 years later, 95 to 99% of the people in this country, white people in this country today, do not believe it. Under those circumstances, there's nothing to celebrate.
Is there a danger that you are eliminating the ability of black people to survive in the face of these very obstacles that you've now just documented?
That's a very good point, Tony, and I'm very sensitive to people who bring up that point of view, but I think it confuses two issues. All my life, certainly the last 15 to 20 years, I have been talking about black people making themselves more aware and other people more aware of how we helped to create this country. That's the thing we ought to keep before the public as much as possible. But that's a different question from the question of whether we should celebrate 200 years of freedom in America. We haven't had 200 years of freedom in America. And I'm opposed to any connection of our experience with that burlesque in this country.
Mr. Calhoun, I would assume, being in the office that you are in, that your views of black participation in the bicentennial might be different. I'll ask you a specific question. Do you believe that blacks should celebrate America's 200th birthday?
Most certainly, Tony. I think that there's several schools of thought, as you pointed out earlier, but there can be no celebration without black celebration. We've been here, we've participated in every aspect of American life. We've influenced, we've impacted on the music, on the medicine, in industry, every aspect of American life. we've been there. So if we recognize America, and I'm sure that the option boils down to one, America is recognized. It is a country. We are the leader as it relates to the free world, as it relates to democracy. We are the longest, the oldest democracy, and blacks have been here. We've contributed a great deal, and of course we ought to participate. It's a good time to dramatize what we have done, to make those others in the society, in the system, aware of what we have done, and to help build a legacy for the future for our people.
If we celebrate if we celebrate the role that blacks have played in making America what it is, aren't we really implicitly saying we're happy with what America is?
Well, I don't think you'll find any black that will say that we're happy with the way things are in the country completely at this time. True, we've come a long way though, Tony, and that's the thing that we've got to acknowledge. We came here, many of our ancestors, in chains, and today we're across the board. We're visible in every aspect of American life. We have black millionaires, we have black business people, we have, well, your publisher, for example, is a true success story. Johnson Publishing Company is a story to be emulated around the world as it relates to success. He started with practically nothing, with a loan, as I understand, and he parlayed it into one of the greatest publishing companies in the world. And so that is success.
I would just like to make the point that again, I have problems with extraneous issues. In 1776, the fact that if some individuals were making some bread, were doing rather well, was irrelevant. It was irrelevant in 1776, it's irrelevant in 1976. For example, George Washington was fabulously wealthy. You know, had more than, some had said more than 200 and some slaves. But he understood that freedom, it has something to do with a man's soul, a man's integrity, whether a man is free in fact. And so he went out to make a revolution in support of his freedom. So I have problems when people associate this with, you know, some cats have done rather well here. That's one thing. The other thing is, are black people free in this society? In addition to that, Brother Calhoun, I would say this in normal times, but these aren't normal times for black people. Black people are in a major depression in this country. Unemployment rate in the black community is 20, 30, 40, 50, 60%. The Urban League, which is a responsible black organization, the NAACP, a responsible organization, both have recently come out with statements saying that we have been wiped out in this country.
Well,
my only thing I would say, under those circumstances, is obscene for us to celebrate.
Well, first of all, I disagree with the fact that we're up to 40, 50% unemployment. There are pockets. True, Detroit is a pocket, but as I understand it, the mayor was in Washington a couple of days ago, and he said that he's down to about 12%. And I think that we see unemployment on the downward spiral as opposed to the upward spiral. There are a number of ways of looking at this. Now, true, the economy is bad. It's bad with everyone. It's not only bad with America, it's bad around the world. I think we're looking at an international crisis insofar as economics go. And so it impacts upon us greater as black people, primarily because a majority of our people are at the bottom end of the spectrum as it relates to getting along in the system. But nonetheless, there's so many things that you can't measure in terms of economics. And I think when you look at the impact we've had on people around the world from a cultural sense, when you look at the contributions blacks have made in the cultural world, there's no way you can say that we haven't done something and that we don't have anything to celebrate.
I just like to make this point. We're talking at cross purposes. We don't have any disagreement, Brother Calhoun, about what black people have done. I think our disagreement is around the question of why and how they've done that. I say they've done these things despite the fact that white Americans have not lived up to the Declaration of Independence, not because they have lived up to the Declaration of Independence. I say we must always be celebrating our survival, our endurance in this culture. What I'm saying, Brother Calhoun, is that the Declaration of Independence has never had any meaning in this country, does not have any meaning in this country today. I'm saying bluntly, Brother Calhoun, George Washington didn't believe it 200 years ago. Gerald Ford doesn't believe it in 1976. Now, what I propose, if you just let me, I don't propose that black people go off and shut the door. I have said what we ought to be doing in this bicentennial year is making the Declaration of Independence a reality. And I say we ought to do it before July the 4th, 1976. Some 5,000 blacks fought in the American Revolutionary War. But it's also interesting to note that even more blacks defected to the British during this period. Why did they defect to the British? Because of the pussyfooting of George Washington and Thomas Jefferson. George Washington didn't want to accept blacks into the army. Only accepted them into the army after Lord Dunmore said, y'all come on and fight for us. Then he did, wait, let me finish. I'm trying to capsule 200 years of history in a brief time, and then I'll be through. The second point we need to deal with in the Revolutionary War period is the beginning of the institutionalization of black America. The founding in 1787, interesting date, of the Free African Society by Absalom Jones and Richard Allen after they had to walk out of a white Methodist church in Philadelphia in 1787. That's what we got to deal with. And just throwing names out will do no good. White people have got to deal with Mount Vernon, Monticello. We've got to deal with what the black experience means in this country over these 200 years. That will make this year significant.
Well, one of the points that he raised as it related to the number of troops that participated in the war and the number that defected to the British, I think in all fairness at that time, blacks went for the highest deal or the best deal that was afforded them. And I think that perhaps had more to do.
You mean they were interested in freedom?
Well, they were interested in freedom, number one, and they were interested in the other.
Well, that's why they made a deal. That's significant.
Exactly.
That's right.
So I think then they went, the 20,000 that fought on the side of the British did so because they wanted freedom, and I think that quest is still here today.
But
freedom,
that's what the Patriots wanted.
Yes.
That's why they were fighting the English crown, because they wanted freedom, which was the principle, which is my point.
Well, I don't think that some of the promises were made on the part of the Americans as related to you fight and we'll give you your freedom. I think those promises came later on down the road when they saw the impact and the influence this would have on blacks that were there at that time. I think that quest for freedom is still alive today as it relates to total participation in the American system, participation in the economic system, as well as the political system. And I think that it's very much alive today.
Can I ask one
Sure.
question? Brother Calhoun, I don't want to put you on the spot. I'm very sensitive to your position. This is the 200th year of freedom in America, people say. You're very close to the President of the United States. The President of the United States, it seems to me, is doing some strange things in this year. He's cutting back on social programs, unemployment. Do you have any recommendations of what he ought to be doing in 1976?
Well, I think the first thing he ought to be doing is listening. I think he, like all of the other people, need a better understanding of the black contribution and the black participation. Now, as it relates to the employment situation, the unemployment situation, the President in his State of the Union said that unemployment is a serious problem. And his approach is that we not come up with makeshift jobs that are going to, at the end of 1 year, disappear and the brother's going to be right back where he was prior to this. We're talking about getting the economy back on its feet so that there is opportunity in the private sector and that the burden of carrying somebody for a year doesn't go on the burden of those that can afford it the least, those who are paying taxes like you and you, Brother Brown, and others who are caught in the lower end of the economic structure in the country. They're having to fork over additional revenue. We're talking about putting more money back from the tax into the private sector so that we can get the country moving again. Now, as to recommendations that I would have for the President, I think that he has gone out and made some very strong statements. He has admitted and acknowledged our participation in the country, I think more so than any other president. He spoke to the National Baptist Convention in St. Louis, and he set the record straight on a number of our contributions. He went to North Carolina Central College, and he spoke to the Assembly, but he also took questions from the students. And at this time, the question was raised as to whether or not Senator Brooke would make a good running mate. And the president admitted that. And I think since that time...
Oh, I didn't know that. His response was made at
North Carolina
at the insistence
Central
of the
College.
student's question,
Yes,
which is the Black College.
Exactly.
Let me ask you a historical... Go ahead. Go ahead.
Just one question there. We could argue economic theory all day. I'm in disagreement with the economic theory that it's expressed. That's another matter. The fact of the matter is that the very responsible Urban League says, for example, administration figures on unemployment for the birds, that real unemployment in the black communities, 20, 30, 40%. Walk down 125th Street, walk down South Parkway, walk down Martin Luther King Drive in Chicago, you will see the unemployment in the black community. It's there. The pain is in the black community, and the president, seems to me to be unaware of it.
No, he's very much aware of it, and I'm not denying it. As a matter of fact, the Urban League just received a grant. I think it's somewhere in the neighborhood of $14 million to deal with this problem. I agree. The accounting system, the method of dealing with unemployment statistics is very unfair as it relates to the inner city, because the statistics they use incorporate a broad area. For example, Washington, D.C.
Excuse me, I have to interrupt because we're very short on time.
Yes.
And I have one final question that I want to get in, and I think it's very pertinent. It is a historical and a contemporary question. Although you feel that blacks should not participate in the bicentennial, wouldn't you agree that the byproduct of blacks being more interested in their history and more interested in their contributions, and I don't mean it just in contributions, the relevance of what our contributions meant in terms of our commitment to freedom, liberty, and justice. Don't you believe that has at least been a byproduct on America's spotlighting its 200th birthday?
Only if those contributions become meaningful within a context of struggle and freedom. That's what the history of black people is about. That's what this bicentennial is supposed to be about. Just the name is useless.
In other words, if we use what we learned during this bicentennial year about black history...
For struggle and movement to freedom.
If we're inspired and motivated by it,
yeah,
you would see a positive conclusion.
If it ends up in struggle and freedom.
All right, thank you. I'd like to thank Lerone Bennett, historian and senior editor at Ebony, for being our guest. I'd like to thank John Calhoun, special assistant to the United States, for being on Black Journal. And I'd like to say goodbye from the Black Journal family. God bless you.
What then to the American black slave is your 4th of July? I answer, a day that reveals to him, more than all other days in the year, the gross injustice to which he is the constant victim. To him, your celebration is a sham. Your boasted liberty, unholy license. Your denunciation of tyrants' brass-fronted impudence. Your national greatness, swelling vanity. Your shouts of liberty and equality, hollow mockery. Your prayers and hymns, your sermons and thanksgivings, with all your religious parade and solemnity, are to him mere bombast, fraud, deception, impiety, and hypocrisy. A thin veil to cover up crimes which would disgrace a nation of savages. There is not a nation on the face of the earth guilty of practices more shocking and bloody than the people of the United States at this very hour.
The preceding program was made possible by a grant from Pepsi-Cola Company.